Hi guys. Thank you for tuning into this other lecture, just going through some of the responses to the activities that you did in the previous lesson for me. Here is just a quick reminder of the methodology of Louise Archer that I've asked you to evaluate, and the 4 methods are at the top there. So you are welcome to pause and have a reread of that information. And these are the 4 areas I'd asked you to make notes on. Okay, so we're going to start off by looking at the general strengths and weaknesses of Archer's research, and then on another slide I'll go through the ones that are more specifically related to the methods that she used. So in terms of strengths, they're on the left. The general strengths and weaknesses of Archer's methodology. So the strengths are on the left, and the ones in the pinky box are the weaknesses. So yeah, it's large scale for qualitative research, 89 students and parents and staff. Therefore, it's very representative of their target population, which was working class, multiple ethnicities, and they're more likely to have counter or anti-school identities. Another big strength is it being longitudinal, means that you can measure the impact of changes over a long period of time, such as the introduction of discrimination laws or big changes and shifts in social attitudes. The fact that it's semi-structured means there is some structure, so it allows some comparisons over time, which positivists would like. And interpreters would like, as it is ultimately collecting lots and lots of qualitative data. So hopefully you got those points down. If you didn't, please add them to your notes now. In terms of weaknesses, her research was only done in London, so you can't generalise to the whole of the UK. London is more ethnically diverse than some northern and southern areas, so much more likely to have hybrid identities. Lots of different issues in London around mixing of communities that are very well mixed, and lots of hostilities that are between the different communities, for example. You might be able to apply her research to places like, Liverpool, Manchester, Birmingham, that are diverse, but perhaps less so to cities like, or areas, even like Eastbourne, for example, or Hastings, which are a lot more ethnically homogenous. Practically, her research took a long time. So therefore cost implications would have been quite significant. In terms of cost, it would have been paying for the salaries of the researchers would have been the most significant cost. Her research does focus on the students that are seen as problems. Like I mentioned previously, they're the ones that were likely to drop out. Now this, according to Howard Becker, is called siding with the underdog. Howard Becker, who you'll have come across from symbolic interactionism, he's a big fan of that. He said, actually, we should be researching the underdogs in society because they haven't got a voice. However, positivists would say you're not being objective then. You're choosing a side to kind of research. You're choosing a side to take. So perhaps not being that objective. So positivists be very critical. Okay. And positivists would like the semi-structured nature of the interviews, but say that it wasn't objective enough. She became quite close to the subjects over the long period of time, so as a result, the close relationship means they lose objectivity. So then I've had to think about the strengths and weaknesses linked to the actual methods that I've asked you to think about. So again, any of these bits and pieces you haven't got down, please do add into your notes, okay? And I tried to link as many of these points to identity and or achievement as I could. I wasn't successful for all of them, but there's a lot in here that would help you write a Band 4 or Band 5 essay if such a topic came up. So in-depth, semi-structured interviews are going to get you much closer to the Verstehen, because you can ask probing questions. So obviously once you've asked the established questions, you can then ask other ones. You're more likely to build rapport. And remember, as I've said before, identity is a complex topic, and you really do need in-depth conversations to work out how it's constructed and the effects on the individual. Particularly for young people who perhaps do not like or feel uncomfortable discussing these issues with an adult. There is some structure, so it does allow for some comparisons over time, and I know I mentioned this in the previous slide, but that's particularly important for investigating young people from that age range, from years 9 to year 11, perhaps the influences of puberty, for example, on their identity. You can almost measure the effects and changes in their ideas and beliefs because of something like that, for example. Group interviews allow the collection of a lot of views very quickly. It's far more relaxed, which makes it more valid, which is very relevant for these students as the peer group is their main source of symbolic capital. So they're more likely to feel comfortable with those groups and open up about their views. Photographic diaries give you access to the home and private life that other methods wouldn't allow you to gain access to. Obviously, going into a home and having an interview is much more intrusive. You're less likely to get that permission. You're more likely to gain insight into the items and people and fashion that students find valuable. Nike, for example, nails, hairstyles, all the stuff that Louise Archer uncovered about those groups. It's a very good example of gaining access to investigate a sensitive subject in school. I've mentioned that before. And again, why would a head want someone to come in and do this sort of research? Why would they actually be quite interested to uncover the problems amongst these groups? Being female, Louise Archer is female, probably really helped her doing this research. Would help some of the girls open up to her about their thoughts and feelings about maybe schooling, perhaps relationships, and definitely friendships. Okay. Now, the problems with her research, thank you very much. The problems with her research, like I've mentioned, it's only in London, so you can't generalise the whole of the UK. London is more ethnically diverse than some northern and southern areas, like I mentioned, so they're more likely to have hybrid identities. Now, that's not really linked to one of the methods, but you could say it was very rich and detailed an ethnography in the area. Another problem is Archer is a feminist, and she might have been very subjective in her interpretation of the interviews. She was probably looking for patriarchy as a cause of the sexualised Nike identity, positivists would argue. Photographic diaries, they knew they were going to be viewed by someone else, so they might have they might have ended up acting in a socially desirable way, taking photos of things that might have impressed people. Got to think, actually, when you think about Instagram and things that people take photos of, are they actually reflecting their true identity or what they'd actually like their identity to be? Again, I've said group interviews are good for these groups, but they are, because identity is linked to the status from the peer group, they're perhaps more likely to over-exaggerate their deviance. In a group interview, anti-school students might be reluctant to open up to the teacher in disguise, which they might see the interviewer as being because they're higher status in terms of age, so they might seem as more powerful. And taking part of this study may mean that those students who are already disengaged in lessons are being taken out of lessons, which ethically could actually hinder their progress. Okay, so that's an ethical problem with the research. And the physical characteristics of Louise Archer, although she was female, that might have helped some of the girls open up to her, but she was a white female, so she might not have had the level of rapport with the ethnic minority students, okay? There's also an argument that boys that she researched might have been less likely to open up because she was female. So the final thing I asked you guys to look at was to compare Archer's research to Sue Sharp and Paul Willis. I'm just going to nip through the points that hopefully you've come up with, but if not, just add them in. Sharp found that careers and independence over family and marriage was the big shift in aspirations. She used structured interviews, which was better because it's more reliable, easier to identify changes and views over a long period of time. So able to measure the influence of large social changes such as the rise of feminism and changes in employment law. But it was worse because she's less likely to build a rapport. The girls might have been trying to impress the researcher by saying things like, hey, I really want a career. Of course, that's really important to me. I want to prioritise my education. Where actually, really, they might have wanted to build a family. They might have wanted to stay with their boyfriends, but they might have been reluctant to say those things to a researcher because they wanted to impress them. Archer found this didn't apply to all girls. She found that working class girls had more aspirations around settling down with boyfriends. Working class girls didn't see university as fitting with their habitus, so you need to link that with Bourdieu's ideas, okay? Again, she had quite a limited sample, and I wouldn't say that applies to all working class girls. We know working class girls from black backgrounds quite often do have the aspirations to kind of go on to university and further study, for example. That's not just her from Mary Fuller. Her study is very similar to Paul Willis, okay, because it examines the role of subcultures affecting working class achievement. Kira. Okay, that's a similarity. But Archer focuses on girls, Willis focused on boys. Archer found that subcultures and therefore failure was due to in-school processes. She found the subcultures were formed because of the symbolic violence those groups suffered. But Willis found subcultures and therefore the failure was actually because of home socialisation, because of what was happening at home, socialising them into fatalistic attitudes. So two very different causes for their ultimate failure. Okay, guys, thank you so much for listening.